Hey, Bran.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the guy that had to go to the hospital after a peekaboo accident?
No.
They had to put him in the ICU.
Yeah, that's what I get. That's what I get. Small peek behind the curtain. We got in here pre-show, and I said, "Oh shit, I got to look up a dad joke." Pat goes, "I've got one." I say, "All right, rip it."
I've been ripping that at any possible opportunity, and I have gotten several reactions like that, and that is exactly what I'm looking for here.
Anytime you can rip a dad joke that I've genuinely not heard before, and so I don't know where the punchline's going, as stupid as I know it's about to be, I think that's a victory. Folks, welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney, alongside Pat Gustafson. We've got plenty to talk about today, as the first round of the playoffs is in the books. We've got some coach rumblings that have, one coach has been hired, as I'm sure you guys know and probably saw in the thumbnail here. But we'll go over that. We'll go over the rumblings around the coaching carousel and anything else that is relevant in the world of the NFL. First things first, though, Pat, the college football playoff national championship is
Fantastic
set.
Weekend, yeah.
They were great games. We've got the championship set now. It is Ohio State versus Notre Dame. More importantly, for you and I, as some of our viewers know, our fantasy football draft order in our primary league for next year is being determined in this year's college football playoff by whoever puts together the best and most accurate bracket. Pat, I don't know if you've noticed, A, that you and I are tied, and B, that I am illiterate and that you were going to beat me because you read the tiebreaker correctly and I did not.
What did you do?
Listen, the tiebreaker in these sorts of ESPN contests for years upon years have been how many points will be scored in the championship game.
Was that not what it was?
No, and you read it correctly too. It is points scored throughout the entire playoff. I checked. Your tiebreaker, you put 300. I put like 50 because it was points scored across all the games combined. I don't think that's how it goes. You are going to be closer because there's been
it's probably already close to 300.
Well
anyway,
over 300. Yeah. I mean, there's been 10 games so far. Yeah, there's got to be at least 30 points on average combined in those games. So Pat, though neither of us can get any more points, so you are going to beat me. We are tied for fourth. So I'm effectively fifth. You're fourth right now.
But can't we move down one if Ohio State wins, don't we drop a spot?
We can move down one spot. There is one person in our league that picked Ohio State to win the national championship. So your priority is either going to be fourth or fifth. My priority is either going to be fifth or sixth. We've locked in picks in the top half of the first round, at least, should we both choose those, which I believe we're going to.
Absolutely am. The only time I've ever kind of gone against the grain is when I'm picking towards the end, and I'll like to go with 12, but sitting here at 4, there's no reason not to, especially if guys in front of us are scared after this past year and kind of go rogue and go back. I'm going to jump up. One year I had the first pick, and I was the third priority because guys got cold feet, and I'm like, fuck it, let's do it.
Well, that's the thing, too. The one person that has a chance to jump us in priority has been rattling off the idea that he's going to go lower in the draft, so he won't necessarily select a pick in the top 5, which would leave both of us in the top 5, which would
be fair.
It'll be hilarious either way if you and I are picking back-to-back. I will very much be looking forward to that.
I would be... Yet I'm the guy who took 2 and then chickened out and traded back to 7 literally within 24 hours of the draft.
Yeah,
so,
it's true. There's chaos to be had for sure. News from around the league. I think the only thing really to touch on right now that came out today is Deontay Johnson got released. That fucking guy is just a nightmare to have around your locker room, I guess. This is his third team this season. Fourth team in the last, however many months you want to date back to when he was on the Steelers. We went Steelers, Panthers, Ravens, and then Texans. The Texans, after advancing to the next round of the playoffs, said, we don't need Deontay Johnson on our roster anymore. That is how bad this has been and how much of a apparent distraction he's been in locker rooms.
It was really bizarre because everything seemed fine in Carolina, and it seemed like the trade... I know there was the rumblings that Baltimore kind of picked him up so no one else could have him, more so, but seemingly out of nowhere here for him to just sort of become the newest member of CTESPN of the former Pittsburgh Steelers, and to be that useless that they cut you, not alone just say, hey, you're on the roster and we're not going to play you, to cut him amidst the playoff run. Something's going on there.
Clearly there is a imbalance of risk reward with whatever's going on with Deontay Johnson. Whatever they thought he was going to bring to them on the football field, which was clearly not much because he barely saw the field. And I mean, I think we're enough weeks into his Texans tenure now to where knowing the playbook, at least knowing enough of the playbook to get playing time, shouldn't really be an issue. And yet he's still barely seeing the field. So, and let alone behind some,
I was going to say like John Mechie
mediocre receivers. Yeah. I mean, he's sitting behind Mechie, he's sitting behind aged out Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson and whatever else he's stuck behind. It's not a good look for him. No. All right, the coaching carousel, Pat. We've got plenty to talk about here, so let's get into the news.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
The New England Patriots, with perhaps the most expected move of coaching carousel history, I would say, this year and prior years, have hired Mike Vrabel to be their new head coach. Again, astute listeners of the pod or followers of me on social media will know that I was beating the Ben Johnson drum for the last several weeks, but all along, I was always going to be okay with Mike Vrabel as the selection as well. I kind of assumed that this was where it was going. It was just once those rumors started to get out there, Ben Johnson liked Drake May, and knowing what a great play caller and offensive mind he is, I was very much into that as my preference, honestly, to Mike Vrabel. But I was never against a Mike Vrabel hire, and now that he is here, I am all in. I'm very excited to see him back home where he belongs, and I think this has the chance to be a real long-term hire for New England. I don't see this being a situation where, it flames out after only a year or two. This feels like what I've been telling people is I'm very happy that we seem to have an adult leading the way now. Somebody who is confident in their role, somebody who is a proven, successful head coach in the NFL, and I believe Mike Vrabel is exactly that. And so, that is one thing I can say is a positive as opposed to if we had hired Ben Johnson. Again, a choice that I would have made given the choice between the two. But Ben Johnson, there's always the potential that he turns out like so many other offensive minds have, where they are not necessarily best suited to be a head coach. Now, I'm not going to make that.
Hi, Matt Nagy.
Right. I'm not going to make that evaluation of Ben. I think Ben has also surpassed, so many of those types of guys. Purely as a play caller, he's been a more successful and more dynamic play caller than many of those failed OCs turned head coaches in the past. But there was a concern, and there still is a valid concern that, maybe he doesn't make the leap as effectively as some hope. Either way, look, Mike Vrabel's the guy we got. I'm very, very happy to see him. His press conference got me excited. And now it's just a question of what's next. And we are looking at coordinators.
Yeah, and it's like the fact that they just didn't do this last year is just stupid. We kind of talked about last week how the whole Mayo process, hiring him, was just kind of not the right way to go. Like, not the right way to go. Unless you're a college football, unless you're PJ Fleck getting absolutely doused with mayo, but excuse me, but I guess it's good for the Patriots because a lot of times it'll be like, oh, this set the franchise back so many years. It's like it feels like more so just a wasted year for the Patriots.
Yeah,
it didn't really set them back at all. Like they got their guy in Drake May, they saw promising things, and now you're going to bring in a guy who is a proven head coach who, at the very least, should have your team in playoff contention every year. But again, I cannot remember a more obvious external hire. Obviously when sometimes it's like, oh, they're going to promote their interim coach. Shit like that happens, and that's obvious. But this was so blatantly obvious. And, you could talk about the Rooney Rule. We could talk about the Rooney Rule for an hour and a half here. An absolute farce that they did. Pep Hamilton and
I know.
Byron Leftwich, who have both been out of football for 2 years, out of the pros for 2 years. And major props to Aaron Glenn for just basically saying, fuck you. For just saying, I'm not going to be your pawn. Again, the Rooney Rule's a mess because obviously it's a good thing with great intention, but every year it just becomes a farce and a farce and a farce, and it's just how do you get around that? But at the end of the day, the Patriots knew who they wanted. They technically went through the process, and they got their guy, and I think it is going to prove to be a very, very good move.
Yeah, obviously I'm a Patriots guy. but I'm not going to defend what they did with the Rooney Rule to circumvent it. I'll say this. The rule itself definitely needs some adjusting or something to happen, because you can look at what the Patriots did and say that was messed up. They obviously interviewed two minority candidates that they had absolutely no intention of hiring, and that probably no team has any intention of hiring, just because those guys were accessible as early as possible. Because the Patriots basically like, how do we get through this rule as quickly as possible so we can get to Vrabel? They were like, these are the guys, because they would have had to wait for a guy like Aaron Glenn or anybody else.
It reminds me of when the Raiders hired John Gruden. They interviewed like T. Martin, who I believe was like the tight ends coach at USC at the time. Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, the league can't say, hey, you have to hire these guys. But at the end of the problem is getting better, but it's just every year it just. And looking at the kind of the availability, it's like, is Aaron Glenn gonna get fucked here again? I think there's a real chance that Aaron Glenn, he's over 50 years old, more than qualified. I don't see the situation where he gets hired right now.
Well, Adam Schefter did report today that he thinks currently that both Lions coordinators will get head coaching jobs. So we'll see where that ends up being. I think that's certainly less surprising about Ben Johnson, whose name has been floated around for a while now. Aaron Glenn, I don't know. Maybe it's the Jets. Maybe it's somewhere else. But that is where things stand with him right now. Back to the Patriots before we move on to Ben Johnson and some of these other head coaching maneuvers. The Patriots have I guess we should go to the coordinators first because we kind of touched on it. But as far as who the Patriots are going to add as their coordinators, I think Josh McDaniels is the obvious one. And quite honestly, Pat, maybe the most ideal, realistic offensive coordinator option, for the sole fact that he's not getting poached ever. No one's giving him another head coaching job. That's just a fact at this point. He is
Jerry Jones. Who's the last idiot of an owner that could do that?
He is now flamed out masterfully as a head coach twice. So if he is into and wants this offensive coordinator job with the Patriots, he'll have it for the next decade if things go well with Mike Vrabel and the Patriots' new regime here. So I kind of love the idea. McDaniels has been nothing but good as offensive coordinator in his career. We've talked about this before. There are certain guys that are just qualified for certain jobs, and he is just a guy who is really good at offensive coordinator, and do not give him more responsibility than that, and he will be just fine. I think it's always funny to me the people that ignore that and they just remember his gaffes as head coach with now two different teams and are like, why would you want to hire this guy? Why would you? And I'm like, guys, every time he's been an offensive coordinator, he's been good. He got the one good year out of Mac Jones that we had in New England. This is a guy that I trust as OC. He might not be he might not be reinventing the wheel like Ben Johnson is, but no one else is doing that. I just want a guy that's going to put together solid game plans and solid strategies for an offense that, overall Mike Vrabel is going to have final say over. But I trust Josh McDaniels implicitly as a coordinator. I mean, he's given me no reason not to. Defensive, who knows? We'll see where that ends up going. But
my God, that's Steve Belichick's music.
Imagine we bring more Belichick's back in. The Patriots are also adding Ryan Cowden to the front office. He worked with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee as the vice president of player personnel, and most recently, as in that last year, was executive advisor to the GM with the Giants. Which, I mean, look, I don't want to look too deep into this, but after their draft, the Giants just had. Cool. They got Tyrone Tracy, they got Malik Neighbors in this past draft. If this Cowden fella had literally any input into those selections, I am more than happy. And honestly, I'm more so just happy that there is a voice getting involved here other than Elliot Wolf. Elliot Wolf is a guy that I don't necessarily mind being in the front office, but as far as having final say over things, I don't think that should be the case. There was actually an article that came out today from Doug Kyde, Patriots beat reporter, who said Vrabel is going to continue working with Elliot Wolf, even though Cowden's being brought in, but it is unclear who has final say over roster control. To which I'm like,
that's good.
To which I'm like, it's Mike Vrabel, man. And not only did we get Adam Schefter on the McAfee show today saying that Vrabel is the man as it relates to that dynamic in the front office, but also Mike Vrabel, if anybody watched his press conference or has seen how he operates as a person, he is such a intimidating dude, hard-nosed, strict father type of fella.
Oh, yeah.
That I cannot even remotely fathom Elliot Wolf being like, Mike, overruled, buddy. We're going with my idea. Mike is going to back this man into a corner and get done whatever he wants to get done. And look, I'm joking and assuming that it's not going to be that hostile. But like at the end of the day, if there's any sort of dissenting opinions, I think we're going to get what Mike Vrabel wants versus what Elliott Wolf wants. And for somebody that already has a good amount of trust in Mike, and at least more so than Elliott Wolf, that does make me happy to see that sort of dynamic. So I'm happy, Pat, as a Patriots fan. Yeah. I have no reason to be anything but optimistic. We have a real head coach here. We have a former coach of the year, for whatever that's worth. We have a guy who went to an AFC championship game with the Titans. We have a guy who was the number 1 seed in the AFC just 4 years ago, I believe.
With Ryan Tannehill mostly.
With Ryan Tannehill. And that's the big thing I want to point out, too. Like, a lot of people have referred to Vrabel as this, like, high floor coach, but he's a guy that he's going to raise the floor, but he doesn't have the ceiling to get over the top and get to a championship. And I'm like, are we really basing that off of the 5-year sample size we have with him in Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill? We're acting like that's all he can ever do. And I understand he had Derrick Henry. I understand that is arguably as valuable of a weapon as an elite an elite quarterback is, to have a sort of a good enough and can raise his level of play quarterback like what Ryan Tannehill was in those years, and then to have a running back who is the focal point of your offense. But I'm like, what head coach? Very few head coaches ever got to the mountaintop without a dude at the quarterback position. And as of right now, that's the kind of player Drake May has the potential at least to be. That is not the kind of player Ryan Tannehill, even at his best, ever was. So I think it's short-sighted. I think it's short-sighted for people to be like, yeah, Vrabel's ceiling is what he did in Tennessee. And I don't think that's true. And where he got to in Tennessee was pretty fucking high, man. Like first seed in 1 year and AFC title game in another. Like I'm excited. I think if things go great, or if things break right here in New England, I don't see any reason Vrabel can't lead us back to the promised land after a couple years. This will not be a 1 year fix, but I'm hoping we can at least get a little bit competitive this year. As far as head coaching moves go, though, Pat, there are teams that kind of know what they're doing, know what they want. And there are teams that are incompetent and don't know what the hell's going on at any given moment. And that seems to just be Jerry Jones over the last several years with roughly every decision he's made.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is just a situation that does not look good on Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. Obviously, they could not come to an agreement with Mike McCarthy. They have thereby parted ways. And it seemed like the big holdup was that the Cowboys did not want to offer McCarthy a multi-year deal. Which, like, I understand it from the Cowboys'
They wanted to franchise tag the coach.
Basically. And I understand that from the perspective of, like, he's been fine, not great. But at the same time, if you're Mike McCarthy, how can you sit there and go to your staff and say, hey, guys, don't go get new jobs. Stick with us. We're going to be here for 1 year with sky-high expectations, and are going to get canned most likely after the year. In what world should Mike McCarthy say, yeah, you know what, that sounds good. Good on Mike McCarthy, and I genuinely believe he is going to have another job this year, whether it's the Bears or the Saints. I think the Bears would probably be a little more likely, but I think he will absolutely have a job as a head coach, and it just goes to show that, like, Jerry Jones' expectations are ridiculous to think that Mike McCarthy and his staff would just be like, yeah, sick, dude, cool, no problem. Yeah. When it's the Cowboys, when they had a really disappointing year, and one more you could argue that he could have been fired on its own merit, let alone parting ways. So one more year like that, and he's as good as gone. So there was no reason for him to stick around.
No, there was no reason. But for me, it's like the process of this is just insane. Jerry Jones has no sense of timing or really of how things are supposed to work in the NFL. It seems like he has no concept of deadlines and like normal procedures. Every other team that got rid of their head coach did so a week or over a week ago. Jerry Jones, by virtue of not making this decision until a couple days ago, not only, kept Mike McCarthy and that staff in purgatory, and, they couldn't know what their futures were at the timeline that most guys tend to know what their futures are. He also missed out on the window to request interviews with some of these other coaches. Like, you can only interview the coaches on a bye, or you can only interview coaches of teams in the playoffs on a bye, like Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, even Steve Spagnuolo, if they were interested in that, while they are on their bye, which was last week. Now, if Jerry Jones wants to interview any of those guys, which, I mean, I would hope he does, at least Ben Johnson, he has to wait until the playoffs are over now. Like, this was a
when they get eliminated.
Or when they get eliminated, yeah. This was a colossal mismanagement of time. You have to make this decision sooner, flat out. Like, if you don't want Mike McCarthy around, there's no reason to wait that extra week and screw Mike, yourself. I think more so yourself. Like, it's just Jerry having no concept of what the best move is for his franchise and just not caring. It screams to me that he thinks the world revolves around him, which we know, but exactly. Like, it's manifesting in even more ways than I expected.
Like, in the fact that you literally would have had the chance to get the greatest coach of all time in Bill Belichick. That seemed like a match made in heaven. And I mean, in theory, I guess Jerry Jones could pay North Carolina, $10 million, which is what he sneezes out every morning,
right,
to get him. But, like, that's going to be a much more difficult process. And you just know that Jerry Jones is going to want to make a splash. Like, literally, the first two names that came up were fucking Deion Sanders and Jason Witten. Like, Deion Sanders, at least he has proven, all the mess aside with Deion in terms of, he's proven to be a good leader, a good motivator, a good head coach. He literally built a program at Jackson State and had Travis Hunter committed to Jackson State, of all the places. Yeah. So we know that he can be an effective coach. There's all the things surrounding it. It would be better off if his sons weren't around, or son, who cares about Shiloh? I don't think Deion even cares about him. But, no. But Jason Witten, remember the last time he got a job that he was terribly unqualified for as the lead color guy for Monday Night Football?
Wow.
And he was awful. I'm
that.
Not particularly critical of announcers. I tend to think most announcers are good. He was awful. Him and Drew Brees are the only people I can remember kind of in recent memory who have just been flat out bad. And it's like, he's a Hall of Fame player, a great guy, and you might want him a part of your organization. Your head coach? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Jerry and the Cowboys just keep making life harder for themselves than it needs to be. Like, this situation with McCarthy, the only reason it's not even more surprising than it is because we just saw this play out with CeeDee Lamb before the season started, needlessly straining the relationship with your star receiver who you intended to extend anyway, but being like, yeah, there's no rush, whatever. Like, you waited until the 11th hour to extend your best player. You waited way longer than you should have to extend Dak Prescott. It's just Jerry Jones does these things consistently that tell me he doesn't particularly know what he's doing anymore. He's not fit for the job at all.
82 years old or something? Like,
he's past, he's well past the
82.
age of knowing, of being coherent. I swear to God. Like, and he, for the fact that this past season too, he came out and was like, no one can do this job better than me. Buddy, I think anybody could do this job better than you. To have the resources and the brand that the Dallas Cowboys are, all it takes is the most bare minimum level of competence to put together, or not even to put together a contender, because that certainly is, a challenge, but like, to not make such avoidable fuck ups. Like, it's just every few months, it's something that he's making headlines for because he was too stupid to just do the common sense thing. And it's crazy to me. Jason Witten, what are we doing? Jason Witten.
And the thing is it's been a long time that Jerry has needed to step away as general manager, but we are quite possibly talking about the biggest egomaniac in sports.
I think
he shares a sport with Aaron Rodgers as well. So that is a feat.
Rodgers to Dallas. Watch out.
Oh my God. They would literally do the Family Guy limo joust where they would just kill each other. But that's the thing, is this guy is just clearly such a narcissist. He is so past his prime as a general manager. It's been 20 years, 25 years. It's been since the 1990s where this was a consistently effective football team. And change needs to happen, and change will never happen as long as, you can't even say as long as Jerry Jones is in charge, because it's as long as he's alive. Because as long as he's alive, he is going to be in charge, because he is that much of a lunatic. that needs to have the power. And again, like I was shocked by Troy Aikman's comments last night. Not in the sense that like, oh my God, like what, he's wrong. Like I was just surprised he was willing to say that.
Yeah.
That he was willing to say that this was not a desirable job necessarily because of the dysfunction in the front office. And he's dead right. But at the same time, you look at it, it is still the Cowboys. They have, good players. CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott has proven to be capable. Micah Parsons on defense. It's like, if they spend some money, which they didn't do last year, this could be a good football team sooner than later. But you are dealing with the most dysfunctional front office, arguably in the format. I don't know enough about hockey, so maybe I'm forgetting. Maybe there's something I don't know, but I'm assuming he is.
Jets is pretty bad. Jets is pretty bad, but Cowboys might be
the most dysfunctional
1A, 1B.
front office in football, and it's going to be difficult. And there's really the big splash hires. It's like, we talk about Belichick, Deion Sanders, like. Does he go for fucking John Gruden? Rex Ryan? Like, because I don't think he's going to hire some coordinator who's never been a head coach. He'll hire Jason Witten, who's never been a head coach. But I don't see him hiring a Ben Johnson, an Aaron Glenn, a Liam Cohen. He's going to hire somebody, even when he hired Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy was a Super Bowl winning established head coach. That is the path that Jerry Jones is going to go with. And it's like, there's no obvious answer right now. And it would have been Bill Belichick had... they fired Mike McCarthy at week 10 when they probably could have.
Yeah, he clearly goes for name value over giving somebody a chance that is deserving from a coordinator spot. Jerry's all about the splash move. I'll say this, the one guy that I could see it being that is, I would say a little bit of both, is Kellen Moore. I think that's the one I would watch. Because we know he likes to hire from within if he can. Mike McCarthy wasn't that, but
Jason Garrett,
he had the loyalty to Jason Garrett for such a long time. I think if Kellen Moore wants a head coaching job, or I should say wants to return to Dallas after, what has been a nice year in Philly, I think I could see that happening. Honestly, I think that's their best option. Like, from realistic options, like, yes, I would love to say Ben Johnson is, but I don't think they're going to go that route, like you said. I think Kellen Moore is the most likely and best real option that they have. Because other than that, I really think it probably would be Deion. Like, I don't see Bill leaving.
I don't either.
And the Jason Witten thing would be truly a new low. Like, that would be Jeff Saturday levels of incompetent.
Remember when Josh McCown was going to get hired? The Texans wanted to hire Josh McCown immediately removed from being a player. Yeah. That's not as hilarious. This isn't that as hilarious as that, but like...
It's still pretty bad. Like to have no coaching experience above the high school level and to be inserted as an that's Jeff Saturday part 2. But at least
that was interim. Everybody knew that was most likely not gonna be.
And it was still future. A terrible choice because why the fuck are you dragging this guy out of high school to be your head coach? But at least that
Teddy
was
Bridgewater, bring him up.
At least that was only for the second half of an already lost year. This would be. This is who's going to lead our he's lost the plot, man. And for any of my wrestling fans out there, and even for any just passively aware fans, like Jerry Jones is Vince McMahon. Like, there are a few people who are just this old, senile, and because they are so old, Pat, flat out, and have been alive and in power so long, they have just lost perspective. They're just out of touch. Like that.
There's another person to add in there that I won't add for obvious reasons. But
that term gets thrown around so often. But like, I think it's important to keep in perspective how true it is when you are so used to being in power and being in your bubble that you don't see what's changing around you. You're completely out of touch. And Jerry Jones, I think if he hires Kellen Moore, like, that would be kind of falling ass backwards into an acceptable option. If he ends up hiring Jason Witten, I think at that point he needs to be escorted to the mental hospital. Like that, there needs to be some kind of intervention done because that is a new level of like you have no clue what's going on anymore. So it's pretty bad. As far as Deion Sanders goes, Deion didn't say yes or no, which was pretty interesting.
It was pretty much that they talked. That was it. That they basically talked about it. They didn't set up an interview. They literally just spoke about it.
Right. They spoke about it, and then Adam Schefter apparently reached out and asked Deion, about the situation. And Deion said, "To hear from Jerry Jones is truly delightful, and it's intriguing. I love Jerry and believe in Jerry. After you hang up and process it and think about it, it's intriguing. But I love Boulder and everything there is about our team, the coaches, our student body, and the community." That is, to me, notably non-committal.
Absolutely.
Even though he's saying, "I love Boulder" and all that. He didn't say, "I'm not going
How many
anywhere."
times have we heard that? Exactly. How
many times have we heard, "I'm not going anywhere"?
Yeah. And they go somewhere. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so the fact he's actively avoiding saying the fact he's actively avoiding saying he's not going anywhere tells me there's a real chance that Deion ends up the coach in Dallas. That then opens up a Pandora's box of, obviously, the next question is, how do they get Shedeur to Dallas? Because I'm sure that would be priority number one should Deion end up the coach there.
I truly think they don't.
There's a chance they don't, for sure.
And the thing is, I think
they'll
Deion,
try.
And like I said, I think Deion will be a way more effective coach without Shedeur.
It's
where
possible.
he won't,
Yeah.
where, it's like you're the coach's kid in Little League. And in this situation, he does happen to be the best player on the field, as opposed to the Little League coach whose son is playing shortstop when he should probably be doing tap dancing lessons. But that could be a whole mess. But that is the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones, an overinflated ego of Deion Sanders. It's it's a match made in heaven. But we'll have to see. And there's really been they've requested no one yet for interviews. This is merely speculation. Obviously, credible reporters have reported things, and I believe them. But there has been no official action, as opposed to these other teams who have all interviewed 7+ guys.
That's what fucking happens when you're a week behind schedule, Jerry. All right, moving on to the other rumblings in the coaching realm. We still have 6 openings. We have the Bears, the Cowboys, the Jags, the Raiders, the Saints, and the Jets. Obviously, the Patriots being the only one filled thus far. Pat, this surprised me, and you'll be excited to hear this, but there's been a little bit of smoke lately about Ben Johnson to the Raiders. How are you feeling right now?
Oh, I mean, that's the obvious guy you want. It's been to the point where I've been kind of saying who would be my second favorite pick, because Ben Johnson is the prize here. And we talked about it, how the Raiders are one of the least desirable locations in terms of the Bears have a young quarterback, or the Patriots had a fuck ton of money, the Jaguars have a fuck ton of money to spend. Maybe Ben Johnson just thinks he can kind of be this Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell type, where he can get, you saw it with Jared Goff, who is a good quarterback, but is, nothing special. He's not an elite quarterback. He thinks he can go and get a guy in the realm of Jared Goff, and his system will be that good that it won't necessarily matter. He doesn't need a Caleb Williams. He doesn't need a Trevor Lawrence. He needs... Maybe he believes he doesn't need much, and he can go and truly build this organization. Because the Raiders, Mark Davis has got to be walking on eggshells. They have had, their last 3 head coaching decisions have been a disaster. It has set that franchise back effectively a decade. And there is no reason to believe, at the very least, if Ben Johnson doesn't work out, he's there for 3 or 4 years, nothing really happens, you move on. It's not going to be a Gruden, a McDaniels, an Antonio Pierce. If they can get him, obviously the Raiders do it. It's just a question of where does Ben Johnson want to go? And I'm usually pretty good at this stuff. I remember last year I had Canales to the Panthers nailed. I had Morris to the Falcons nailed. And we had that reel of the Dan Quinn reel where I'm they're gonna hire him, and you're why? And then it's they're not gonna do that. Yeah. But
hey, it worked out. Good for the Commanders, man.
I've usually got a good finger on the pulse here. I have no fucking clue about any of these 6. I was trying to even formulate some predictions to talk about, and it's just so all over the place. There's been 34 guys interviewed or contacted.
It's crazy. It's a lot of guys.
7 teams counting the Patriots, and it's I have absolutely no idea, and I think it's just going to kind of depend on which is the first domino to fall, and it's probably Ben Johnson.
Yeah, it's I was interested by the fact that, the whole story with Ben Johnson all along has been he wouldn't leave unless it was for a perfect situation. And I guess the definition of perfect situation can be interpreted a few different ways, but the main thing that people always threw around was which quarterback does he want to work with? It's why he was rumored to be interested in the Patriots. It's why the Bears have been considered such a heavy favorite for so long, because he can go work with Drake May or with Caleb Williams. If he goes to the Raiders, obviously they're bringing in somebody new, but like they're not particularly positioned to bring in anybody above average. Like even in a draft trade, this isn't a strong quarterback class. And so is this the perfect situation for him? It's just kind of interesting.
We'll talk more about this, but at least my kind of favorite plan of action was trading the 6th pick for J.J. McCarthy. And that could be kind of Ben Johnson's kind of mold, but
I think that's
the Vikings have a tough decision to make here. Now we'll talk more about that later, but you're right. Them winning those 2 games at the end of the year truly fucked them, because at the very least, like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders aren't these slam dunk guys, but they're top picks for a reason here. Like you can at the very least build your franchise around them and with a good head coach. But if the Raiders, I actually really like all the guys the Raiders have interviewed except Steve Spagnuolo. What the hell?
Steve Spagnuolo, I just want off the Chiefs, but I don't think he's going to succeed as a head coach.
He is a fantastic defensive coordinator. He was the defensive coordinator for ththose giant Super Bowl wins over the Patriots.
He's a big
That's how fucking
problem.
Old he is. That's what I mean.
He has caused me nothing but pain.
He bombed in clears throat St. Louis. That's how just old this fucking guy is, that he was the coach of the St. Louis Rams. But, like, you look at somebody like Aaron Glenn, who can bring in Tanner Engstrad as his kind of offensive guy, or Todd Monken or Pete Carroll, who are both guys that have made it clear that they like to run the football. And that's kind of been what the Raiders are trying to do. They just don't have the personnel in terms of players. But at the very least, you're going to have a head coach. Like, they brought in Antonio Pierce. I don't even remember who the fucking offensive court. Oh, it was Luke Getsy. Gee, good Lord. You bring in a terrible... You needed to bring in a stud offensive coordinator to go with Antonio Pierce if you wanted to run the football like that.
Yeah, Luke Getsy.
Honestly, like... Tough alum Shane Waldron, perhaps, but they've interviewed 7 guys here: Carroll, Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, Vance Joseph, Todd Monken, Robert Saleh, and Spagnuolo. Besides Spagnuolo, I would be very fine with any of those guys getting hired.
Yeah, I think
obviously Johnson's the prize. Obviously.
Yeah, it's just interesting with Johnson. The report is that he wasn't even going to interview with the Raiders, and that Tom Brady essentially talked him into it, which makes me curious about going forward. I wouldn't be surprised Ben Johnson and Brady sharing a vision over what they want to do going forward. They're both clearly very gifted football minds, and Brady, even though the scope of his involvement isn't fully known at this point, I expect it's going to be pretty high involvement.
I think Mark Davis will trust the best quarterback ever's judgment.
And I think the fact that they got rid of Tom Telesco when they didn't really need to is maybe telling of the fact that they think maybe Johnson's the guy, because Johnson we think he wants this clean slate. He wants his own GM, whoever his pick is. So Telesco just drafted Brock Bowers, and that was a slam dunk pick and not an easy pick. That was a pure best player available, not necessarily a positional need, and turned out to be the smart move. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
Looking at the kid who might be one of, when it's all said and done, a top 5 tight end in the history of the league.
I would have 13th. I don't think anybody in the world would have blamed him for not drafting Brock Bowers, because they just didn't need the guy, or seemingly didn't need the guy, but it was a slam dunk pick. So to get rid of him tells me maybe there's a plan in place here.
That's why that 6th pick would be, I'm not up to par with a lot of these draft prospects here, but 6 would be a good spot to take an offensive lineman, which they desperately need.
There should be a lineman available there.
They at least have some solid. Obviously, Max Crosby's a stud, and they've got other solid pieces on defense. It's just that offensive line and run game were just so. Everything on the offense, quarterback play was terrible, and you trade Devontae Adams. If you weren't named Brock Bowers, that offense was a disaster, and they have a lot of work to do. But maybe Ben Johnson wants that challenge instead of kind of getting pushed into an already good situation. Maybe he wants to create the situation.
Yeah, I kind of
that's
always
all I can
him,
see. Yeah.
I pictured him going to a place that, I don't know, was a little bit more put together. But I guess maybe, like you said, he wants to build it up. It's very possible.
That's the only way I could see it, is that he just wants his deal.
The Browns have a new offensive coordinator today. I'm noting this so we can note something else after. But they hired promoted Tommy Rees to offensive coordinator. He spent time at Notre Dame and Alabama as their offensive coordinator and quarterback coach before joining the Browns staff this past season as the passing game specialist and tight ends coach. He is only 32 years old and is now one of the NFL's youngest coordinators, so he will be the OC on Kevin Stefanski's staff. The reason I note that specifically is because Clint Kubiak had interviewed for the Browns offensive coordinator and Seahawks offensive coordinator job. As far as I know, those are the only ones he's interviewed for thus far. But this is interesting, Pat, because Clint Kubiak was one of the names that, we talked about a lot last offseason about the potential he could bring to the Saints offense. And other than the Saints offense, their weapons falling apart, he did a great job.
He's a future head. Clint Kubiak is a future head coach. Obviously, it's not going to happen right now. But I think the spot for Clint Kubiak is Seattle. He's interviewed there as well because you've got a lot of good pieces in place. And, can he elevate? It was more so the run game was why Ryan Grubb kind of got run out there. We saw, a huge emergence from Jackson Smith and Jigba, and obviously DK Metcalf is DK Metcalf. I think that would be the best spot for him, if not a place like Cleveland. I'm surprised Cleveland didn't go outside with just how bad that offense was. That Ken Dorsey decision was awful because they didn't think Alex Van Pelt would mold their offense enough around fucking Deshaun Watson, who we will also talk about later. Thumbs up, smiley face. And so they bring in Ken Dorsey, who just bombed miserably in Buffalo, and we saw Joe Brady go in and just leave Ken Dorsey in the dust. So to kind of promote from within was just a little surprising, but as we'll talk about, Deshaun Watson is probably not in their plans this year, so we'll see what Tommy Rees can do.
The hit rate for these offensive coordinators that get fired and then immediately get another offensive coordinator job seems horrific. I don't like... It seems like Shane Waldron, Luke Getsy...
those two are...
and then...
Ken Dorsey.
Ken Dorsey, just massively flamed out. I think you need to at least take a year, it seems like, to have a different sort of title. Like, Joe Brady, I know, got kind of scapegoated out of Carolina or just poorly performed in Carolina. Came to Buffalo, was the quarterback's coach for a year, and then ended up as interim OC and then permanent OC. It just seems like you need a year off sometimes.
I think Ryan Grubb, for example, could be that guy who goes and does something else and then reemerges as an offensive coordinator in a few years when he's a little older there. But yeah, I mean, the Browns are going to we'll see. We're going to have to look at them with a completely different perspective. If there is no Deshaun Watson, it's like, who is the quarterback? What can they put around him? And can they be a half decent team? Which we all thought they would be this year if Deshaun Watson would not be the worst fucking quarterback in the NFL.
Full season of Dorian Thompson-Robinson inbound, baby. Let's go. And as far after Clint Kubiak, who interviewed with the Browns and the Seahawks, there is an infinite amount of Kubiaks because the 49ers promoted Clay Kubiak to offensive coordinator. This is interesting because this is only the second time that the Niners will have an OC by title in the Shanahan era. The only other time was with Mike McDaniel in 2021. Other than that, they've just had the, passing game coordinators and whatever it is. Kyle Shanahan was effectively their offensive coordinator with just people helping him. But now, first time he's had somebody promoted to that title since McDaniel, so something to watch. And the Kubiaks just seem to be pretty good football minds,
nepotism, I guess. Not to say that they're not good football minds, but just you look at that you look at the NFL compared to other sports with such big staffs. Nepotism is wild.
Oh yeah.
I mean the Kubiaks, Kyle Shanahan. Again, Kyle Shanahan's one of the best football minds right now. So, but it's just interesting to see who will be the net. Even Wade Phillips was a nepo baby. So. But again, who's to say that they won't be? That Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, they shit out guys over and over again. I saw Jay Gruden tweeted yesterday that he hired both Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell on that Washington staff, and he goes, "I bet they won't mention my name once."
Oh yeah, you guys are off the Gruden coaching tree. Go fuck yourself, Jay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on.
That's the more likable one too.
I know. Let's move on to our wild card recap here, Pat. We had seven games. I can't fucking count. 6 games in the opening round, and how do I summarize them? I guess most of them went as expected. Some of them bit surprising. So let's just go down the list here. I have them kind of chronologically in the order the games were played. This one was, to me personally, the most surprising.
It was the only one I got wrong. Yeah.
Texans 32, Chargers 12. The Texans were limping into the playoffs, very little momentum. Kind of just looked like a bad year from them, one where they managed to get into the playoffs by virtue of their conference being weak, and they just kind of did enough to get in at 10-7. Boy, oh boy, did the Chargers, and specifically Justin Herbert, throw this one the fuck in the garbage. I could not have seen that coming.
The over-under for his interception, I forget which one of those fantasy guys tweeted the pick of the day is Herbert under 0.5 interceptions.
It's probably under 0.5, yeah.
That's what the line was.
Yeah.
For him to... That offense has been kind of viewed as the safest offense in the league. Obviously, Herbert has only had 3 picks all in the regular season. They're kind of a steady run-first offense. For them to implode the way they did against the Texans defense, that is just kind of fine. It's not like the Texans have this fantastic defense.
It's upper half for sure, but nothing that should completely rattle a quarterback. Yeah,
for them to implode the way they did is just borderline inexplicable here. And... obviously Herbert was the subject of much slander on social media until the game last night. And it was funny, there was this one thing of Jalen Hurts and having this beautiful pocket, and just throws a dime for a touchdown. They go, imagine Justin Herbert with this. And it goes, yeah, he'd have all day to decide which interception he wanted to throw. And it's the thing, Justin Herbert in hypothetical situations. And again, not to say that Justin Herbert's not a really talented guy, but this was arguably the biggest stage he's been on. A game that they were expected to win, as a road team. And for him to just look as bad as he looked is rough. That is a rough way to end in overwhelmingly positive year one under Jim Harbaugh. We thought they were going to stink. They had a great year, and just to end it with such a wet fart is just so disappointing. That disappointing is I feel like a disappointed parent almost with this Justin Herbert performance.
I agree, and it's funny because I'm a bit of a Texans sympathizer, but also I've loved Justin Herbert for a while and thought that he's a guy that just hasn't had the opportunity to show exactly how good he is. This is a real hit to the Herbert agenda of the whole, he's top 5, even though he's probably exactly number 5 behind, sort of the big 4 of quarterbacks of Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, and Burrow. This now was his second ever playoff game. The first one was that massive choke job against the Jags 2 years ago where Herbert, granted, that wasn't necessarily because of Herbert, but Herbert also only had 273 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks in that game. So it wasn't like a blow-you-away performance there either. It's tough because playoff games, right, are such a small sample size by nature. You're only going to play in a handful of them unless you're Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes and you're there every fucking year and you can bang out 3 or 4 of them. So to try to judge a guy off of 1 game or 2 games in his career versus such a large sample of regular season games is hard, but you have to also think about the fact that it's a completely different environment of game, and that does matter. So you have to balance those 2 things, right? It's a small sample, but it's also a different stage, and does that level of stage affect how you're performing? This Justin Herbert performance, I find it hard to describe it as anything but a choke job and a guy who was not comfortable or ready for a moment this big. I don't see how you define it any other way when a guy has 3 picks all year. Too. 3 picks all year and has 4 picks in his first playoff game against a struggling team.
And we're not talking about how, if this was the AFC Championship and they're playing for a spot in the Super Bowl. This is the 5 versus 4 wild card game. And for him to shit his pants like that, is just remarkable.
It's tough because it also raises the question of okay, put together your top 10 quarterbacks for next season. Do you ignore this because are you putting that list together as it pertains to the regular season? Are you factoring in how they might perform in the playoffs once they get there? I just think I'll say this, Pat, because this was probably borderline already coming in. I wouldn't blame anybody for putting Jaden Daniels above Justin Herbert.
I was about to pose the question. Would you rather? I was going to ask the same thing for Jalen Hurts as well, because those are the first two guys that popped into my mind. It's like, who else could be ahead of Herbert in a hypothetical ranking here?
I don't want to overreact too much, even though it was an abysmal performance, to one abysmal performance. But I think this definitely takes a hit. Or Herbert takes a hit here and maybe drops out of some of those top 5 conversations. The if man allegations have certainly
SEC
resurfaced and gotten even stronger. All right, let's move on to the Ravens and the Steelers. This game basically went as expected. Ravens
didn't watch much of this one. Didn't need to.
Yeah. Ravens 28, Steelers 14. The Ravens, eye test wise, may very well be the favorites to win the whole thing. The biggest question for them this season was their defense, which has been a lot better in the second half of the year. And their offense is probably the best offense in the playoffs. So they are dangerous. Derrick Henry in the winter months is a problem. And
good Lord, man.
I think if I had to re-pick my Super Bowl champion, even knowing that their path is going to require, Bills next round, Chiefs presumably after that, I think the Ravens should be Super Bowl favorites right now.
Yeah, Derrick Henry just put his head down and just destroyed them. Like, they're like, no Zay Flowers? I guess we have no wide receivers at all. And they just abused the Steelers' defense, and it was working, and they just kept going at it. And they are, man, that game, to already get a game that good, Baltimore at Buffalo in the divisional round, is what the playoffs are all about. It really is.
Yeah, it was that game. That game is the Super Bowl as far as I'm concerned.
It's gonna be fantastic. When is that game? I didn't see the schedule yet. I'm pulling it up.
It's either Saturday or Sunday.
No kidding.
I don't leave my house, Pat. It's gonna be the forecast in Denver for this weekend. It's like -9 and then -18. So I'm not leaving my house.
6:30 on Sunday night. That's the matinee game on Sunday night.
6:30 on Sunday night. Let me go on a tangent really quick. What's the weather going to be Sunday? It's actually gotten better. Sunday has a low of -9 and a high of 13. So either way,
you decided to live
not
in
leaving
Rocky
my fucking
Mountain
house. We're pretty fucking close. Look, it was just nice to see Lamar and the Ravens look comfortable in their first game. Not that they should have had much pressure on them in this home game in the first round. Lamar's, for better or for worse, choker allegations have generally come in future rounds, not the first round. But it was nice to see them take care of business here in their first game against the Steelers, who continue their trend of, we're going to make the playoffs probably and then lose. So that brings up a question, Pat. Do you think Mike Tomlin should still be safe? What do the Steelers need to do here? Because these seasons, as nice as it is to be like, yeah, we're probably going to make the playoffs every year, they seem to have a really narrow range of outcomes every year. It's like you are either going 9-8 and missing the playoffs, maybe making it somehow, depending on how the standings break out, or you're going at best. I don't even want to say 11-6. That doesn't even sound right. Like, that seems like too much. No. You're either going 9-8,
and even if they lose in the play, like they'll lose in the first round of the playoffs here.
Congratulations, you're going basically 500 and losing in the first round every year. So I don't know what to make. I don't know what their next move is.
Yeah, it's just so tough because Mike Tomlin is a Hall of Fame coach. Like, Mike Tomlin has been one of the best coaches of the last 20 years, and should they move on from him, you will have every team with an opening knocking at his door, and rightfully so. So I understand why you don't want to let that go. But it's hard to call it a rut, because a rut, you feel it's low. They're in a rut, but it's kind of like halfway up. To be just perennially stuck in this same spot over and over and over again, definition of insanity is trying the same thing and expecting new results. I said last year I thought they should have gotten rid of him. And
I'll tell you what I think is the bigger deal here, and I think it's the quarterback position. And I think
it very well could be.
Like sometimes we forget or minimize just how important the quarterback position is. It doesn't happen often, but I think sometimes that can get lost when you're discussing things like head coach and just how a team's season's playing out over and over. Because there are guys on TikTok that I actually like quite a bit. The Nerd Sesh boys. Hopefully they can rebound on YouTube or wherever they move to after TikTok gets launched into the sun. But one of their guys, one of their guys, Logan, is a huge Steelers guy, and he pointed out like this is a quarterback thing. Like the Steelers since Big Ben left have dealt with Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, and it's those quarterbacks that Tomlin is creating teams around and dragging to the play. He's dragging Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph to the playoffs.
The guy's a phenomenal coach.
And so it's just all they seem to need to get at least over that hump is, God, a top 15 quarterback in the league, maybe? I mean, we could talk top 10 if you want, but like I don't even think they've had a top half guy in the league for the last 10 years.
Even Ben at the end of his career was really starting to fizzle out as well. So it's been a long time since they've had, a top of the line quarterback. And it's just difficult because it's like, do you give Justin Fields the shot? He didn't look terrible. He didn't look great. But where do you turn to if you're the Steelers? Again, they're in a position every year where they fuck themselves by making the playoffs and have an early 20s pick, which left them with Kenny Pickett a few years ago. It's like, what do they do? Where do they turn? Do they try to go and get J.J. McCarthy? It's like, because you look at, are there even any good free agent quarterbacks besides Sam Darnold? Who, again, we'll talk about him very soon. I'm looking right now.
Think so.
Jacoby Brissett.
For reference, I also very much exaggerated the 10 years. Ben retired in 2021. I don't know why I feel like he retired in like 2016, but nonetheless, for the last several years that this criticism has come about, it's because of the quarterback situation.
You look at it this year, the only like true starting quarterback that is a free agent here is Sam Darnold. And again, he had a good year statistically. We'll dive way deep into that. And then you've got a lot of top of the line backups, and it's like that's kind of the rut they've been stuck in. Like you can't go that way, and it's like even trading like all these top of the line quarterbacks, they're not going to get fucking traded, and they don't, or they get to trade up and try and get one of the kids. It's a weak draft class for quarterbacks. It's like they're just in such a tough position right now to live in. It's hard to call it mediocrity because they're making the playoffs every year. But I would just kind of call it like no man's land in terms of direction of the franchise.
At the end of the day, free agency is just not where you're going to find your franchise quarterback 9 times out of 10. It feels like the Steelers are constantly trying to find like the Baker Mayfield solution. Like that guy comes along once in a while, a guy that flamed out of a different situation and you can get the most out of. And I believe in Mike Tomlin to get the most out of a guy, but
you need a Dave Canales. You can't bring in an Arthur Smith and expect him to bring the absolute best. Like again, I think Arthur Smith, it just screams average in terms of an offense. Like they like to run the ball. Oh, Najee Harris has had 1,000 yards every year in his career. Like that's only an average of like 70 yards a game.
Yeah,
which is nothing.
It's like 63.
It's just when I think of Najee Harris, I just rank him as a 6 out of 10 running back. Like the Steelers just feel like such a 6 out of 10 team, which again, it could be so much worse.
They probably win 60% of their games every year. So yeah,
that's what I mean.
Right.
So it's like
that's exactly right.
So it's like, how do they make this step? And I absolutely believe that Mike Tomlin can be the guy to do it. But it's just like, if you're going to make a different decision at quarterback, this is just such a tough spot. Like, you're going to really need to try to find a diamond in the rough, but I don't believe the current personnel they have can bring that out of a Geno Smith or a Baker Mayfield or possibly a Sam Darnold.
And the other problem with them is that they can't ever get one in the draft because they're always these top, 15 teams, or they always make the playoffs or are right on the cusp. Like, they've never had a top 10 pick in the Mike Tomlin era. And so,
I'm trying to even remember.
Now, credit to Mike Tomlin. He did make a good point today where he was like, you don't need a top pick to find one of these guys. Lamar Jackson was picked in the back half of the first round. Jalen Hurts wasn't even a first-round pick. So, but they need to take more stabs at these quarterbacks, I feel like. Like, who have they even drafted that would give them a chance to be, like, I mean, I guess they've drafted Mason Rudolph, they've drafted Kenny Pickett, but are they even trying to find the next, Jalen Hurts kind of guy, like second rounder who's going to floor? It feels like they've just gotten these stopgaps every year and aren't actually getting a guy that has, okay, let's see what he can develop into. I mean, I think Mason Rudolph was kind of that, and it just didn't work out, is what it is. Kenny Pickett was kind of that. So, I mean, maybe they're trying every couple years, but I don't know. I feel like they need to try again. Like I think the Steelers are going to draft a quarterback this year. Just who and when. And
yeah, you look at under Mike Tomlin, the Steelers have had a top 10 pick once. They had the 10th pick in 2019 when they took Devin Bush, who is no longer with the team. Like, they've had some great picks. I mean, you look at these guys, what they've got them highlighted here. You've got all pros here. TJ Watt, 30th overall. Marquise Pouncey, 18th. Cameron Hayward, 31st. David DeCastro, 24th. Those are guys who have all made all pro teams. Yeah. But that's never been the issue for the Steelers. It's just the quarterback position. And, it's so hard because I just can't see a world where Art Rooney goes and fires him. Just with the way that franchise has had the same 3 coaches for like the last 100 years.
Yeah, I know.
It's all about loyalty, and again, rightfully so. Mike Tomlin will be in Canton, and if they do move on from Mike Tomlin, every team will be knocking at his door, and they should be, but it's just a very precarious situation.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one. They got to find themselves a quarterback some way, somehow, because I mean, God, if they're making the playoffs every year with these mid-ball ass dudes, I'd love to see what they could do with anybody who's even remotely above average at the position. The Bills, 31, the Broncos, 7. This was a blowout, even though the Broncos got out ahead 7-0, made people, maybe raise their eyebrow a little bit with that touchdown early to Troy Franklin. This was also kind of a trendy or bold upset pick by some, even though the spread was, I believe, like 9.5 for the game. And look, even I thought the score would at least be a little bit closer in this Bills-Broncos game. But the Bills are them. Josh Allen showed why he's an MVP candidate. He murdered one of the best defenses in football this year. Not really much to say about this one. This was kind of more or less expected, even though it was a trendy upset pick. The Broncos had a great season. They're ahead of schedule. I think at this point, priority number 1 for them is just to get more weapons for Bo Nix. Bo is already panning out much better than I thought he would. I think Sean Payton's done a great job. Sean Payton's done a great job of maximizing his skill set, hiding his weaknesses. Now, I think he just needs to get some more playmakers, particularly a run game that isn't. Like, the Broncos had the best pass-blocking O-line in the league. I'm not sure where they ended up falling in run blocking. It had to still be pretty high up. But as far as running back talent goes, they had a 3-headed midster of Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime. I don't know if I'm forgetting anybody. I guess Tyler Batty was in there.
Until he died, literally, the second game he played. Yep.
Yeah, so, their run game wasn't anything to really help Bo out. Receiver-wise, Marvin Mims came on like crazy at the end of the year. And Cortland Sutton is, I think, still a reliable option. But I think they could use one more solid pass catcher and anybody to boost that run game. And if they do that, I think this is a team that can absolutely compete here going forward.
We talked about the Chargers being a pleasant surprise. This team has been an unbelievably pleasant surprise.
Very surprising.
I thought they were going to be, picking in the top 10 here for Sean Payton to get out of Bo Nix what he did. And, unlike the Chargers who, really flamed out in the playoffs and had a really disappointing performance, they were almost double-digit dogs here, the Broncos. No one expected them to win the game, and they got outclassed by a much better team. It happens, but they are absolutely moving in the right direction, and you're absolutely right about, the offensive weapons. It's like they're almost there, and they're in a position, they'll probably pick around 22nd-ish, where it's like they're in a good place to get one.
Ashton Genty, welcome to Denver, buddy. Possibly.
Yeah, right. I mean, you think he makes it that far?
I don't know. It could be one of those drafts where, like, that position is just not highly coveted. Like, I remember...
It never is, but he's that good.
I know, he is that good. I'm thinking back to, like, when Najee Harris got drafted by the Steelers, I think right in that same spot. And it was like...
So does Josh Jacobs as well.
Yeah, same that thing. Was like the one pick I remember that draft with Najee and the Steelers, that even though it was that far down in the draft order, you could, like, have earmarked that months ahead, and then it's what happened. So, like, that's kind of the fit I feel here.
We're looking at a Bijan Robinson, though, a situation where, like, Genty is more than likely gonna...
he should go top 12 somewhere.
Exactly. The running back position has been so, devalued recently. But this kid is that good where it's going to be like an Ezekiel Elliott, Adrian Peterson. Hello, Trent Richardson. Bijan Robinson kind of deal where it's like this kid is a top 10 talent.
Cam Scattaboo, welcome to Denver. All right, Eagles 22, Packers 10. This was a low-scoring, icky affair, but not ultimately that surprising because these were the 2 best defenses in the NFC in terms of yards allowed this season. what do we make of Jordan Love here in the Packers offense? Because there's a lot of things to unpack here. We can blame the elbow injury. We can blame the Eagles defense for being good. We can blame a lack of weapons and then subsequently injured weapons. We can blame maybe Jordan Love's just a playoff choker. What should Packers fans be feeling about him right now?
I mean, I will say, I had this game on more as background noise, and it felt like every time I looked up, the Packers training staff was on the field. Mm-hmm. Like, they were just getting absolutely decimated. And again, they lost to a better team. But with Jordan Love, I would still feel fine about him. I would still feel fine about the direction that this team is heading in. I mean, they got a stud now in Josh Jacobs, and, Matt LaFleur's proven to be a really good coach. I think it was just a lot of circumstances. I think they were so banged up, and you lose a bunch of guys during the game as well. Kind of skid into the playoffs a little bit. I just think it was more so the circumstance. Like, I think they'll come back next year, and their wide receiver situation is so bizarre with all the guys they have. None of them produce particularly high numbers. It's like, do they want kind of a guy? Because they don't have a guy. Like, I drafted Jaden Reed a fuck ton, kind of out of necessity in a lot of leagues this year. And he's a great little toy. He's like prime Debo Samuel kind of deal. Do they go and get that guy?
I think they need somebody.
I think they do too. It's like, but is Matt LaFleur kind of going to go the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay route, where it's like, we're going to find someone who can be that guy rather than go and get an established number one guy? Again, this is such a run-first offense, too, that they just may not prioritize it.
I just don't know if Matt LaFleur has the draft pedigree that those guys do. Like, you got Sean McVay was able to snipe Puka Nacua out of fucking nowhere and turn him into just God himself. And then, the Niners just drafting their skill players the last several years have been insane, finding Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Debo Samuel. Matt LaFleur and the Packers in general at the receiver position have drafted a large bucket of mid for the last several years, other than Devontae Adams, who might be the solve here himself. Devontae Adams back to Green Bay with his future in New York certainly up in the air, with Aaron Rodgers' future also up in the air. I think that would make a lot of sense. I don't think the Packers have the luxury, and they kind of proved it in this game, of going, and in my head, I compared it more to the Bills, like offensive structure this year, where Josh Allen is so goddamn good that he doesn't need anything more than like receivers that can just get the job done, kind of, is what he's got with Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman might end up better than that, but you know what I mean? The Packers can't afford to have just Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs. I think Christian Watson's time in Green Bay is done after tearing the ACL.
Very unfortunate.
Not ever being able to stay on the field. I did see Matt LaFleur's press conference, or some sort of interview he had the other day, maybe today, he talked about Tucker Kraft, about trying to feature him more, and maybe featuring the tight end more is an option. And I think that's totally fair. Tucker Kraft, I think, flashed this year more than any Packers pass catcher did. So if they make him a primary weapon, maybe they can get away with some more secondary pieces. But either way, I still think they could use a real alpha weapon here, something close to an alpha weapon to elevate this offense. They need something.
There are some good wide receivers out here, but they're all kind of, they're all like around 30 years old, which again isn't, a death sentence
you got
for a
like
wide
Godwin,
receiver.
Keenan Allen,
Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, all guys who have, been either good to great in their career, but it's like, are you getting that guy? I think the only guy that's really in the prime of his career is T. Higgins, and potentially Chris Godwin. We'll see how he bounces back.
Every team in the NFL, every fan base is like, all we need is T. Higgins and we're good.
Yeah,
he's one man. I can't hear every fan base be like, this is the first step for our offseason. He's only going to one fucking team. Maybe it'll be the Packers. Who knows? But yeah, I think it's just a tough question for Packers fans right now, because it's not like they're in a real rebuild. I don't feel they're like, this was a season where, not that they had Super Bowl expectations necessarily, but like after last year, where they knocked off the Cowboys in spectacular fashion and then lost to the Niners on, just a really late mistake by Jordan Love, it was like, okay, this is a team that can theoretically, like, their window is now. And so now it's like, this was, again, we didn't come into the playoffs thinking the Packers were going to beat the Eagles or that they were going to win a Super Bowl, but it's like, if they're supposed to be winning in this window. So what do they have to do now to where they can face the Eagles next playoffs and be favored? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Because right now we're looking at it like, oh, well, they lost to the Eagles because the Eagles defense is really good and their O-line. Yeah, okay. The Packers are supposed to be trying to find ways to be better than that. So what do they have to do? And I think getting a better pass catcher is step one. I think maybe upgrading on defense and just making that, because like their defense performed really well this year. Like I said, second best defense in the NFC in terms of yards allowed. Getting some more reliable pieces there, because Jair Alexander was a guy they thought they could rely on. If they could replace him with somebody that actually stays on the field, maybe they could just be one of those crazy defensive teams and kind of be structured a little bit like the Eagles are. I think that's maybe the formula, but they gotta do something here, and it's going to be interesting to see what path they end.
It could be it could be a way worse situation in Green Bay, I think.
100%. And I'll say this about the Eagles. I'm not loving my Eagles Super Bowl pick right now. I'm glad they made it out of the first round, and I'm hoping that Jalen Hurts maybe is just a little bit rusty.
See, that's what I was about to say. That's just how when you're watching him, you just like you don't feel like you're watching 100% Jalen Hurts.
No, and it seems like if you have to point to any like sort of weakness on this Eagles team, you can't really point anywhere but the quarterback position. Like every other position group on this team is loaded. So the weakness has to either be quarterback or coaching, and I don't think it's coaching this year. So yeah. I think Jalen Hurts needs to elevate himself over the next couple weeks if the Eagles are going to have a real chance at a Super Bowl this year. I made the joke on Twitter, Pat, and this was just one of a few deficiencies I think that Hurts had, but watching him try to hit the edge when he was running was a painful exercise. There were times like he wasn't afraid to scramble, which is good. Like that's a good sign and all to have that dual threat ability to your game. But he kept like thinking he could beat guys to the edge, and I'm like, bud, you're fucking slow. Like I don't know if it's because you're concussed and things just aren't all firing on all cylinders, but like I knew he wasn't going to make it there. It didn't seem like he ever knew he wasn't going to make it there. And it was just a repetitive. Buccaneers 20, Commanders 23. Not the shootout we expected, but still decent scoring, but ultimately just a really, really good game. The takeaway here is that Jaden Daniels is that fucking dude, man.
Yeah.
I don't know what more to say about him, and I feel it feels like deja vu, and like there's a bit of hold on a second because you were talking about CJ Stroud the same way last year, and then look what happened to him. I feel, maybe I'm prisoner of the moment, I feel Jaden Daniels is a different level, and I feel that Jaden Daniels is already showing himself to be clearly a top 10 quarterback. Again, as we mentioned with Herbert, I don't hate you if you got him at like number 5. I really don't.
And again, the biggest difference between Daniels and Stroud is obviously the running upside. Jaden Daniels is already, a top 4 or 5. It's crazy that most of the top quarterbacks are running quarterbacks now, but he's definitely a top 5 running
Joe Burrow, hold the line.
Hold! I don't know what you would call Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is not a running quarterback.
Patrick Mahomes is Aaron Rodgers mobility level, where he
can run, but he's not a runner. Yeah. I think the upside that Daniels has, and honestly, I just hope this is a case where Cliff Kingsbury doesn't get poached. I don't think he will this year, at least, to be a head coach somewhere else. But I think they've got a really good system. Dan Quinn is a maniac. Dan Quinn is one of the more underrated maniacs in terms of going for it. And
your name is Dan. You're going.
Well, that's what they're calling it. Dan Campbell and Dan Quinn. There will be 0 punts in that game, and if there are, the punters will only be throwing passes.
Punters can
this game has the potential, but yeah, really, really just rock solid. Because when you think of the running quarterbacks, you think of volatility, but Jane Daniels was just absolutely rock solid out there, and the classic doink at the end to win the game.
I love Zane Gonzalez, by the way. Yes. Zane Gonzalez is amazing. His OCD dealing with that is
he has genuine OCD. I was unaware of that, and I watched a video about it, and that's a whole other thing. But yeah, to have the best game of the weekend be topped off with just a hilarious moment. And happy for me because I had Washington. That was, and I had a little money on them as well. But bet safely, kids. Call the hotline. But
I'm literally sponsored by a bookie. You don't have to say that under your breath on this channel. I think the Commanders.
MyBookie.com.
Literally. I'm happy for the Commanders. I'm happy for Jaden Daniels. It sucks for Baker Mayfield. That weird little turnover on just an unfortunate play that kind of ended up defining the game. Oh, my
goodness.
Just game of inches, man. Just sucks for him. But it's cool to see a team like the Commanders and a quarterback like Jaden Daniels have such a drastic turnaround this year and now be capped off by, a playoff win, telling people that, like, we're here. Like, we're legit. This is real. We're not going away. And just the...
Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted.
Pat just yawned and sounded like a... I don't even know what that was. That was like a vuvuzela. I was like, what the hell is happening?
I was muted and then you stopped talking and then I looked up.
I was trying to think. I was like, is that a reaction to something I said? I was like, I think I was saying some pretty generic, like, banter about Jaden Daniels. All right. You too, buddy. Great season for the Commanders. Disappointing ending for the Buccaneers. But now we have a great game to look forward to next round. Commanders, Lions.
There are tears, and I'm surprised it took 2.5 years for something.
It took a while. I was like
almost 2 years for for me to forget to mute. I think it was because I muted on my AirPod, but it doesn't work on the computer. I think that might have been what it was.
Oh, it could have been a lot worse.
That was fantastic. That was fantastic.
Moving on to the last game of the week.
So boring, sorry.
Last game of the week with maybe the most, biggest takeaway here. Rams 27, Vikings 9.
Now I picked, nailed, man.
I picked the Rams in this game,
as
did you. The concern being, what would Sam Darnold do in literally his first playoff game? And man, it's nice. Hey, look, sucks for Sam Darnold, but it's nice when your suspicions are confirmed. God, he shit his pants, man. It was bad.
Thank God for Justin Herbert, because Sam Darnold would be an absolute donkey this week if it weren't for Justin Herbert. And this, I know it's only been 2 games, really, but this changes the narrative so much on Sam Darnold here. Where there was a huge question where it's like the Vikings have 2 paths they can go, and it seems like, on the surface, that they're both good paths. And in theory, I still think they both could be. Like, at the end of the day, yes, these were 2 of the biggest games of Sam Darnold's career, and he shit his pants. He's been there now. Not everybody does what Jaden Daniels does, or C.J. Stroud, or go out there and look really good to start your playoff career. It just doesn't always happen like that. This leaves the Vikings in a position, and then it leaves a ripple effect, because whichever of these 2 guys is not the Vikings starting quarterback this year will be a starting quarterback on another team. And the question right now is, is Rick Spielman still the Vikings GM? God, I might have really dated myself on that.
I think it's Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Well, God, I'm gonna look up when Rick Spielman left there, and I'm gonna feel like 22 he left. Okay, so I'm not that.
That's
far.
not that long. That's okay.
Okay, Vikings GM, gun to your head. What do you do? What do you do this offseason?
I don't think there is a chance in hell that Sam Darnold is their starting quarterback next year.
It's crazy, because 3 weeks ago, if you asked me, I thought there would have been no chance in hell that he wasn't their starting quarterback. But then the thing is, you look at other teams. These other teams, like we've talked about, the Steelers, the Raiders, teams that need quarterbacks that probably aren't going to be in a position to draft one. Sam Darnold is really scary. Just because he just be a Kevin O'Connell product? And I did say that maybe Ben Johnson thinks he could be. If Ben Johnson thinks, I can get Sam Darnold and he can be my Jared Goff, then he might be a fit in Las Vegas. But is that really going to be the case? Because you look at a lot of these mid-ass quarterbacks that ping-pong around, like Gardner Minshew, Jimmy Garoppolo. Sam Darnold, I do believe, is a step above those guys. Like, I believe he's like closer to a Jared Goff than he is in terms of talent. But there's a lot of reason to believe here that he is a Kevin O'Connell product, and it's a really scary thing. Like, especially a team like the Titans, stay the far fuck away. If you're the Titans, draft Cam Ward, man, stay away from that. But like, for these QB needy teams, Sam Darnold is certainly good enough to be a top, a starting quarterback in the league. But it's just, that's such a risk, and it's so hard for the Vikings, for a guy that played so well all year. only to really have 2 bad games and for it to completely turn the narrative. We haven't seen J.J. McCarthy yet either. This wasn't a deal like J.J. McCarthy started a couple games, looked great, and then went down. This is all still on, speculation, and considering how good this draft class has been for quarterbacks, I think it's kind of the assumption that J.J. McCarthy will slot right in with them. We don't know that for sure. Like, we've seen it from Sam Darnold in Minnesota, so it's like, it's a really tough decision, but I think if I'm the GM right now, I'm letting Darnold walk, but I don't feel great about the decision.
I think the idea will be, you're right, we don't know what J.J. McCarthy's going to be, but if O'Connell was able to get what he got out of Sam Darnold after all those years of irrelevancy, then he should be able to get at least 80% of that out of J.J. McCarthy. And if you can get at least 80%, if not 100%, if not more than 100% of that out of J.J. McCarthy, then it's worth re-rolling the dice to see if J.J. McCarthy can also perform in the playoffs. Because now you're at a point, Pat, where Sam Darnold just had this great year. Not only did he have a great year, the Vikings went 14-3.
This is a team that's in a really good position.
So, but my point being, what happens next year? Vikings fans are literally, if they bring Sam Darnold back and start him, they are going to be waiting all year for the pin to drop. He can put together another full season like this, and everyone's going to be like, well, we went 14-3 last year, and then he turned into a pumpkin. So why would we, I think re-rolling the dice is the move here. And I think, they're different things, but J.J. McCarthy won a national championship in college, Pat. I think he's less likely to be fazed by a big moment maybe than Darnold is. I mean, truthfully, I'm not sure. What did Darnold do at USC? I know he didn't win a national title because I know USC hasn't won a national title since whenever the fuck. With what, Reggie
Matt
Bush?
Leinart.
I don't think. I'm sure he played in big games, but you know what I mean. NFL playoffs. I'm sure these were the biggest games.
And that was so long. That was so long ago. When was he drafted? 2013, 2015, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just let's see, Cotton Bowl in 2017 against. That was Darnold in 2017.
Oh, it was 2017.
Cotton Bowl against Ohio State.
College.
Yeah. So but yeah, no, national titles or nothing like that. So look, that's a small piece of the puzzle, but I think it's in their best interest at this point to go with JJ. Maybe I would say maybe keep Darnold around, but I think Darnold's earned the right to be a starter somewhere. But
he's not going to re-sign there as a backup. I know.
No way. This is all trending toward what I said a few months ago, and then it seemed like I was going to be an idiot, but trending toward what I said about Darnold's going to fool some team, and they're just going to be bad with it. Now, the Ben Johnson thing...
the team to fool them. They're radiant.
The Ben Johnson thing, I think there's something to be said there. I do think Ben could get enough out of Darnold for him to not revert back to just pumpkin mode.
I wouldn't hate it.
He's a
distinct upgrade from
Aiden
Gardner Minshew and Aiden
Minshew,
O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell will be a fine backup, but he is not a starting quarterback. As much as I like the kid.
It is crazy. It is crazy how much can change in 2 weeks, but when it's the 2 biggest games of the season and you show that that's what you're going to perform like with
nothing, man.
So many self-inflicted mistakes. That'll overtake a full season's body of work, as sad as it is. All right. Let's preview the next round, Pat. We've got our divisional round picks. Obviously, we have our original playoff picks, but we have free reign to go back on those if we so choose in these divisional round picks. First, Commanders at Lions. This has the chance to be a hell of a fucking game.
This could be the real shootout that we thought last week was going to be, because the Lions are just much more of a potent offense than Tampa.
Right. I think the Commanders have the chance. The Commanders are the type of team that will play up to their opponent offensively if need be. Like if the Lions are just coming out there and boat racing them up and down the field, like the Commanders are the team that'll be like, okay, well, we can score too, and then you end up with a game, both teams scoring in the 30s or maybe the 40s. I think we're both probably still going to go with the Lions here. I like the Commanders to give them a scare, but I think the Lions are going to come out on top here regardless.
The Lions opened as 5.5-point favorites, and the line is now 10.
Wow.
I don't know what happened. There just must have been a lot of action on
Jaden Daniels get shot. What the fuck?
The Commander, yeah,
I mean, shit. That's interesting. I think
Or on the Lions, must have been.
I think I'd take the Commanders plus 10 to cover that at least. But then again, I said the same thing about the Broncos against the Bills, so maybe I'm wrong. But I think we're both going Lions here.
Yes.
The 1 seed's not gonna lose, not yet. Moving on to the other game in the NFC, we've got the Rams at the Eagles. This one intriguing because it seems like we've got two teams maybe trending opposite ways. Now, again, the Eagles. Maybe it was just rust for Jalen Hurts. The Eagles have still played incredibly well as on the whole for the last 3 months of the season. But the Rams seem like they've fully gotten in gear here, and they've also played really well, and they are playoff tested. I think this is, if Ravens-Bills weren't on the menu, this is game of the week. Yeah. I'm torn. I am
going to change my pick and go with the Rams here.
Gonna go with the Rams.
You just look at. I saw a tweet. I believe it was from Field Yates, basically saying how gutsy Sean McVay was to rest your starters in Week 18 with something on the line. Like they were set up for. They win that game. They're playing the Commanders as the 3-6 team at home. Obviously, they weren't going to play at home no matter what, unfortunately. But to rest your players and risk potentially the Lions in the first round. Obviously, it worked out. Because Sean McVay is just one of the most prepared coaches in the league. Like they know what to do. Like they had, Sam Darnold was lost. There was that 4th down one where he was just standing there like a statue in the pocket and just got absolutely bum rushed. Like they had him read like a book. And who's to say they can't do that here? I don't think it's going to be as dominant. Obviously, you're going to be in Philly this time, but. I will. That's the one. Well, I don't want to spoil my other ones, but I will change that pick because in my original I had the Eagles, but I will go Rams here, and they are. They're getting 6.5. Get me. Do I have a hammer? Do I have something in here that resembles a hammer? Probably. Keep talking. I'm looking.
Yeah, it's below your belt. I think I'm gonna stick. Fuck. I'm gonna stick with the Eagles. I'm gonna stick with my pick. But again, I don't feel awesome about it. I think, Pat, if you look at this a certain way, and again, it's never quite this simple, right? But when you look at the best coach left in the playoffs and the best quarterback left in the playoffs on the NFC side, I think the Rams have both. And that is an interesting proposition.
Yeah.
Now, granted, after all the Jaden Daniels glazing I just did, I guess maybe I don't fully.
I understand.
That.
Matthew Stafford's
in terms of
won
playoffs,
a Super Bowl,
playoff experience, built for the moment, and still has a ton left. There's a chance that the Rams have both of those things, and when it gets into the nitty gritty of the playoffs, that can be a big difference maker. So, look, at this rate, would I be surprised to see the Rams in the Super Bowl? No, I wouldn't. I'm gonna pick the Eagles here. I don't feel great about it. Okay, we'll go over to the AFC, Pat. The Texans and the Chiefs. Fuck, man. God damn it.
I think this has the potential to be not the closest game in the world.
The thing that annoys me is like
8-point favorites, the Chiefs.
I wanted to believe that, the Chargers were going to beat the Texans by a lot because I believed in the Chargers, whatever. Now it's like I want to believe that the Texans are going to be able to do that same thing, but now is where I'm sure they're going to let me down and just not show up for the fucking game. I want to be wrong on that so bad, but this Chiefs team is going to take advantage of a Texans team that has, again, limped for a lot of the season.
I'm just cracking up because, of course, that is the first game of the weekend, the Texans. The Texans always play the first game of the weekend. That is the 4:30 Saturday game because, of course, it is. Yeah, Kansas City's rested, they're ready, and it was a really good win from Houston last week because they were pretty much counted out. But I just think Kansas City's going to be way too much. Am I going to say that they're going to cover a whole 8 points? I don't know how I feel about that yet, but I think they're going to win this pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think the Texans were even going to make it this far.
On a Speedway guy, we'll tell. Yes, I'm a huge NASCAR fan. We'll finish this. We got some.
Okay. The game of the week, the actual game of the week, the game of the year, quite honestly. Ravens, Bills. We've got the Ravens as 1-point favorites on the road in Buffalo. We had this game earlier in the year in Baltimore. The Ravens rolled the Bills 35-10. I think we can more or less throw that game out. because if this was a 25-point game, there would be riots in the streets of whichever team lost. So, I mean, I expect this game to be incredibly close, and I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens. I think they are, like I said, I stand by. They look like the best team left in the playoffs. I think they should be overall Super Bowl favorites. And as much as, I love Josh Allen, it sucks because this is a game where someone's got to lose. And these are both two quarterbacks that I desperately want to see one of them win a goddamn Lombardi.
And Stephon Diggs will be standing on the sidelines looking no matter who wins.
Stephon Diggs is still in the playoffs, technically. He's watching from the sideline.
I am going to stick with my Super Bowl pick here in Buffalo merely because I picked them to win the Super Bowl.
That's fair.
I think this is going to be
They haven't shown you anything to turn you off
I think
yet.
this is going to be the game of the year that is not the Super Bowl. I at least hope so. That would be fantastic. But, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, they're both playing MVP caliber football. And both of these teams are looking really good at the right time. In Buffalo, I will go with the home team there.
All right. Those are our divisional round picks, folks. Our rest of playoff picks are still alive. I had Eagles over Ravens in the Super Bowl. Pat had Bills over Lions? Or Lions over Bills?
I had the Bills winning. I think it was Bills over the... Yeah,
it was the Lions because it wasn't the Eagles.
Yeah, no.
Bills over Lions. So those are our picks for the rest of the way, and we will see what transpires here in divisional weekend now. Folks, thank you for tuning in to Brand Coverage. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
You shut the fuck up. All right, for those of you still in the chat, thank you guys for hanging out. We will address these donation messages first and foremost. Brock with $1.99 said,
shutting off my camera because I need to leave for work in 10 minutes, but I'm still here.
Brock said, I had the Bucs winning the Super Bowl. RIP. Sorry, buddy. That was a terrible pick, if I'm being quite honest with you. Bailey with $5 said, I'm expecting Ben to the Bears, Glenn to Las Vegas, Jets get Nagy, Jags get Cohen, Dallas get Dion, or another college coach. All right, that's a whole host of predictions. God, the Jets hiring Matt Nagy is maybe the funniest one. The rest of
that was my takeaway that the Jets hiring Matt Nagy would be such a Jets move. I'm fucking here for it.
It would be so awful. Julian said, when is Ben Schwarber coming back? Man, I never realized how close his name was to Schwarber.
Lucian, I'm not wearing pants.
I don't know when he's coming back. He's training. Edward with $5 said, the problem is Tomlin. It will remain Tomlin until Art Rooney stops being a coward or relinquishes control to his son. Wilson's not the problem. See, I disagree. I don't think Wilson was the problem. I think Wilson did well enough this season, but it's just different, right? Like Andy Reid's pedigree got completely changed and altered into him being arguably the greatest coach of all time. Is probably still behind Bill Belichick, but to be in that conversation, it took him getting Patrick Mahomes. These great coaches need great quarterbacks for them to achieve great things more often than not. And I just think dealing with guys on the tier of Russell Wilson for so long is not ideal. They need somebody who's above average.
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that take though, in the sense that Tomlin very well could be the problem.
It could,
but
be,
I think they'd be more likely to succeed with Tomlin and another quarterback rather than Russ and a different
and another coach. Yeah, I mean, who are you bringing in to maximize what they've put out there every year? I think Tomlin's done as much with as little as anybody possibly could. Granted, their defense is talented, but Oliver with $5 said Lions winning the Super Bowl. Hey man, I hope so. I'd be more than okay with that.
$5.
Any messages in the general chat we'll answer until Pat has to go to work. Let's see.
The mouse has me by the nuts.
Let's see. Jets hire Nagy without a quarterback. That'll be hilarious. Yes, that would be very funny. But hey, Matt Nagy, here, do something with Jacoby Brissett. I mean, shit, I don't even know.
Tyrod Taylor.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat before we hop off here. Let's see. Someone said, oh yeah, Pat usually doesn't wear pants.
That is correct. I am not wearing pants.
Joey said, hey, Brent, any news on when Eliminated Quarterback Club is coming out?
It's one of the favorites.
Yes, it is one of the favorites. That will come out probably tomorrow. Yeah, I'll work on that.
I just hate you that that's just your job.
Yeah.
I'm about to go and sit there for 6 hours. in a Smedium shirt.
Hey, I mean,
and you're out here wearing wigs and shit.
I used to do that. It just didn't fit my vibe anymore. You know, it wasn't as much fun. I don't like
I'll see your ghost. I'll see your ghost there. I'll tell him I said hey.
Let's see. Okay, GT God said Quan or Henry. Quan or Henry. As far as who I'd rather have, Saquon. Generally speaking.
In the long run, yes. Like, I was actually talking to my dad about this, where it's like, Derrick Henry's become one of those guys where it's like, in terms of his downfall, you're just gonna have to deal with it when the downfall happens, instead of saying like, oh, this is gonna happen, I'm gonna back off. No, you're just gonna have to deal with the fact that, like, you're gonna draft Derrick Henry and he's gonna fall off, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. I'd rather do that. But that said, Saquon's younger.
The nice thing with Derrick Henry in terms of fantasy football, and I've come to terms with this, and it's why I've ranked him in my top 10 for early rankings next year after not having him there for the last several years, is because even when his fall off does come, in the Ravens offense, like, that fall off will probably come in the form of, like, you know, he's getting a bunch of carries. Maybe he only ends up with 900 yards, but it's still going to be like 11 touchdowns. It's going to be like the year Zeke had like 2 years ago. And I don't think he'll completely bottom out to where if you take him in the first round, it fucks your team. It might not be the production you were hoping for, but I don't think he's going to like be useless unless he gets hurt. Bailey has a question for you, Pat, with a $4.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't listening to a fucking word you just said, because I've been thinking.
Who do you expect to disappoint in NASCAR this season?
See, it's so tough this year just because, like, the field is turning very much into, like, one glob. So, like, the really top teams, it's going to be hard for them to disappoint. Shit. I don't want to say any of the Hendrick guys. I don't want to say any of the Gibbs guys. Oh, boy. Yawn again, make another bizarre noise. Fuck it. Denny Hamlin. Fuck it.
Denny Hamlin.
That guy will never win his championship.
I'm glad you said a guy whose name I know.
See, that's the thing, is he's been in the Cup Series since 2005.
Let's see. Respectful Eagles fan said, are people overreacting to Jalen Hurts' 131-yard performance versus the Packers? I mean, look, it's valid to be concerned about it, but at the end of the day, the Packers' defense is good, and Jalen Hurts was not practicing for like 2 weeks. So I'm not that worried about it. If he throws up a dud, I mean, obviously you're worried about it if he throws up a dud in the next round and gets eliminated from the playoffs. But as of right now, am I like overly concerned about this? Not really. And then we'll do one last question here from Jaeger. He said, I think the Rams coming back from the bottom of the NFC West to now in the second round of the playoffs, possibly the NFC Championship, might be one of the biggest comebacks in a while. Yeah, I mean, as far as in-season comebacks, it's certainly possible. This was kind of something we always knew they were capable of, but they were just getting railed by injuries all year. Yeah. And then they got healthy, and they got lucky enough that injuries didn't preclude them from the playoffs in the way that I think the Niners kind of did. Like, the Niners kind of started to get healthier at the end of the year, but it was too far gone.
Way too little too late.
It was too far gone.
Yeah, another Sean McVay masterclass. Like, this guy is an unbelievable coach, and his team will, at the very least, be competitive more often than not. But yeah, they've overcome a lot here. And like I said, I think they're going to win. I think they'll make it to the NFC Championship here.
Yeah. All right, let's not make Pat late for work, folks. For Pat,
I don't give a shit.
I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you for joining us.
Mickey, get